A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising, and have come to do him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written through the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly, and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word, that I too may go and do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out, and behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them, until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. The Gospel of the Lord. As I was preparing for this feast, which celebrates the pilgrimage of the Magi, I happened to read about a pilgrimage that was made by 3 wise men this past August. The names of the wise men were James Wall, Paul Coakley, and James Conley. And I call them 3 wise men because these 3 are American bishops. And the journey that they led was on the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, the great pilgrimage which runs across Spain to the Cathedral of Santiago and the tomb of James the Apostle. Now, there have been a lot of stories and a lot of books that have been written about the pilgrimage and the Camino. And there was even a motion picture that came out last year that was entitled The Way, which stars Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. But there's a story about how the Camino came to be, which is especially fitting for this day. And to tell it, we have to go back all the way to the time of the apostles. We hear from the book of Mark that as Christ was about to ascend to his Father, he commanded his followers to go forth and to preach the gospel to every creature. And according to legend, James, the son of Zebedee, went forth to the Iberian Peninsula, and he preached the gospel to the Spanish people. And then when he returned to Jerusalem in the year 44 AD, he was beheaded by Herod Agrippa. And according to legend, his followers placed the body of James in a boat, and they made a great voyage through the Mediterranean Sea, through the Straits of Gibraltar, and up along the Atlantic coast. And in the northern part of Spain, they came ashore, and they placed the body of James in a tomb in an ancient Celtic cemetery. And they built an altar over the tomb to commemorate James. But then, in the years that followed, the site and the area were the scenes of great battles between the Romans and the Visigoths, and then between the Christians and the Moors. And amidst all that, the location of the tomb was lost, and for centuries nobody knew where the tomb of James was. But then, in the year 813, there was a young shepherd. His name was Paolo, who was living in the region. And one night, he was out tending his flock, and he happened to look up, and he saw over the horizon a very bright star. And the night after that, he looked again, and the star was in the exact same place. All the other stars in the sky had changed locations, but that one star was in the same place. And the night after that, the same thing. And so Paolo thought that the star was calling him in the direction of the star. And so he followed the direction of the star, and his journey took him into a field. And in the field, he found a tomb, and over the tomb there was an altar. And so Paolo told what he had found to his bishop, and the bishop came out and examined the tomb and confirmed that this was the tomb of James the Apostle. And the bishop reported what he had found to the king. And as a result, two things happened. First, there was a great cathedral built on that spot, and that cathedral now holds the tomb of James the Apostle. And secondly, the place got its name, Santiago de Compostela, the place of James in the field of the star. And the story about Paolo and the star and the finding of the tomb spread through all of Spain. And the people saw it as a sign. They saw it as God speaking to them, telling them that He was here. He was present in their world. Through the light of the star, He had guided Paolo to the tomb of James. And now, in the telling of the story to them, He was guiding them too. And so they began to make pilgrimage to Santiago along an ancient way that went from the east to the west across Spain. And that way became the Camino de Santiago, the way of James. But they also remembered how the tomb was found, and they had another name for the way too. They called it the Camino de las Estrellas, the way of the stars. And eventually the story of the finding of the tomb of James spread to other countries, and those people also began to make pilgrimage to Santiago. Now, because they began their journey in different places, they would take different routes to the tomb. And so the French came across from the French side of the Pyrenees Mountains through Pamplona and Leon and some of the other big cities, and that became known as the French Way. And the people of Portugal would travel north along the Atlantic coast, and that route became known as the Portuguese Way. And when the story spread to Great Britain, those people crossed the Celtic Sea and they came ashore, and they took a route that went southwest that was called the English Way. And to remind them and to remind everybody else that God was guiding them on their journey, they carried a particular token. And this was the shell of the great scallop. In Spanish it's called la vieira. Now if you look at the shell of a scallop, you see that it pretty much looks like a human hand. There are these ridges and grooves that all form in different places on one end of the scallop, and as it goes across the scallop, they all come together. And so when they would look at the scallop, they would tell themselves that whether they began their journey in Spain or France or Portugal or the British Isles, that the hand of God was guiding them to the place of James in the field of the star. And so today we hear proclaimed the great pilgrimage of the Magi, guided by the light of a star, from their homeland across the Arabian desert, through Jerusalem and past the snares of Herod, to Bethlehem and to the newborn Son of God. And as we go forth if we ask ourselves, what does our gospel mean for us today? We should think about what the story of the Star of James meant to those early pilgrims. Through the gospel, God speaks to us, and He tells us, I am here. I am present in your world. Through the light of my star, I have guided the Magi to the place of my Son. And now, when the story is proclaimed to you, I am beckoning you too. And you don't need the light of a star. You don't even need the shell of a scallop. You can just gaze at your own hand, the hand that I made in my image. Whether the journeys of your life take you north, south, east, or west, through all the snares, the hardships, the trials, and the illnesses that come with this life, know that my hand is leading you, just like it led the Magi. Indeed, just as it has led you this very day, here, to the place of my Son.